Story 1. The Man Who Smiled Back. I remember the trail near Clingman's dome like a bruise on memory. The morning had been thin and bright, the kind where sunlight barely trickles through, catching in the mist and making it hard to tell where the ridgeline ended and the sky began. The ground was slick from the night's rain, dark moss clinging to the stones, and the air smelled of pine and wet leaves. I carried a pack, too heavy for the short hike, mostly out of habit, and moved slow. There's a hush in those woods that feels different from other silences, less like peace, more like something waiting. The sound of my boots crunching gravel felt almost too loud, like I was disturbing something I shouldn't. I told myself it was nerves, or maybe loneliness, though I'd always claimed I liked being alone out there. It was a clearing that stopped me. A pool, still as a pane of glass, lay at the center, no wider than a cabin's roof, yet deep enough to hold the sky. I stepped closer, crouched down, and leaned forward, expecting to see myself scowling back in the rippled surface. What I saw wasn't a reflection at all, not the way reflections ought to work. It smiled first, before I could move a muscle. My own face, grinning wide and wrong, stretched like it knew something I didn't. My stomach dropped hard. I jerked back, almost slipping on the wet stones. The pool rippled faintly, but the grin stayed fixed. Even as I stumbled away, I didn't breathe right for minutes. I hurried on, heart thumping so loud it covered the wind. That's when I saw him, or me, walking just inside the tree line, a figure with my gait, my slouched shoulders, moving in perfect rhythm. At first I thought it had to be another hiker, someone coincidentally dressed like me, but the way he slowed when I slowed killed that thought quick. When I stopped altogether, the forest held its breath, and still. From between the pines he leaned forward one more step. I called out more to hear my own voice than anything, and the reply came back. My name, spoken in my exact voice. Too close, like it had been hiding in my chest the whole time. I didn't run. Running would have felt like giving him permission to chase, so I walked steady, eyes forward, though every sense screamed to glance back. I made it to the cabin before the sun dropped. An old place built tight against the slope with wood grayed by decades. Inside, I locked the door, lit a lamp, and sat waiting. The silence pressed heavy on the windows, and every creak in the boards felt like footsteps pacing me. Hours stretched thin. Near midnight, I glanced through the porch glass and nearly dropped the lamp. He was there, standing still, head tilted, wearing my coat, my face. He didn't knock, didn't move, just stood as though he had been there long before I'd arrived. I stayed awake till dawn. My eyes burned, but I didn't dare close them. At first light, I cracked the door, bracing myself. The porch was empty, but the earth kept its record. Footprints, mine, clear as any I'd ever left, circling, not leading away, but looping around the cabin over and over. Like I'd been pacing all night without knowing it. I followed them a few yards before stopping cold. Every print matched me too perfectly, even the crooked set of my right boot sole, but they weren't fresh. The edges had softened, pressed into mud like they'd been waiting there days, maybe weeks, before I ever arrived. I gathered my things quick and left the mountain. I told myself I wouldn't look back, but every window, every pane of water on the trail caught me peeking. I've never stayed at that cabin again. Still, sometimes in the shine of a storm puddle or the warped glass of a window, I catch him, my face, my stance. Always smiling first, like he's been practicing while I wasn't watching. Like he's waiting for the moment when I finally move in rhythm with him and not the other way around. Story 2. The Fire Tower Reflection. The fire tower I worked in wasn't much to look at. Just an old structure of wood and steel joints bolted together in the 30s, swaying when the wind hit right. It sat on a ridge where the Smokies roll out like waves, deep green in the day and dark as bruises at night. I had taken the midnight shift for years and I never minded it. Some folks don't like being alone that high up. The trees swaying under you, the sound of the forest pressing from every side. But I liked the stillness, the way the radio crackled only when you wanted it to, and the silence stretched out like it could carry you. It was mine. At least, it always felt that way. Until that night. It was near midnight when I climbed the ladder, boots on steel rungs, the same rhythm I'd kept 100 times before. Halfway up, I paused because something wasn't right. At first I thought I was catching glare off the lantern inside the watchroom, some trick of reflection through the glass. But no, the shape wasn't mine. A man was already standing there, framed in the square of the room above. My height, my build, even the same Forest Service hat tilted on his head. For one broken moment my mind tried to explain it away. Reflection, fatigue, something. But then he moved. He turned his head and looked straight down at me, and I saw my own face, hollowed with the same tiredness I carried. The tower groaned under me as I froze, one boot halfway to the next rung, unable to make myself go forward or back. The wind picked up, rattling the frame, and I gripped the sides of the ladder until my hands ached. I must have stood there too long, because by the time I forced myself to climb the rest of the way, the watchroom was empty, the lantern burned low, the same as I'd left it, but on the desk sat 2 mugs of coffee. One was mine, cold from hours untouched. The other was steaming fresh, a curl of heat rising into the chill of the room. I didn't touch it. I didn't even breathe near it. I set my pack down, tried to steady my nerves, and told myself there had to be an explanation. But every time I glanced at that mug, it seemed to inch closer to me, like I'd only just poured it. The night dragged on with a weight I'd never felt in that tower. The silence wasn't the same silence I was used to. It was heavier, sharper, as if listening back. Every time I shifted in my chair, the boards beneath me groaned, and somewhere else in the tower, another board seemed to answer half a beat too late. The radio sat quiet. I didn't even try to call out. What would I have said? There's someone here, only it's me. No one would believe that. Around 2, I got up and paced the room, needing to move. My reflection in the glass kept catching me wrong, just a fraction of a second off. Sometimes the reflection turned a blink before I did. Sometimes the eyes held too long. When I finally made myself step close to the window, I swear I saw him again, standing on the ladder, frozen halfway up, staring back with my face, just as I had been hours earlier. I blinked hard and it was gone, just the black shape of trees below. I sat down and tried to ignore the second cup. But sometime after 3, when my own exhaustion had me drifting, I woke with a start to the scrape of chair legs. My heart stopped cold. There was no one in the room, but the other chair at the desk had been pulled out, turned just slightly toward me. The mug beside it was empty, stained dark at the bottom. I couldn't finish the shift. Just before dawn, I climbed down, every rung aching like it might give under me. The forest below looked unchanged, mists curling, shadows stretching, but I kept feeling a second rhythm to my steps, someone descending with me. I made it back to my truck, started the engine, and drove down the ridge without looking back. I told myself I wouldn't return, but the job pulled me there again, weeks later. That second cup was waiting every night after, steaming when I arrived. I never touched it, never dared, but it felt like someone, or something, was waiting in that room, wearing me thin like a mask, watching to see how long it would take before I sat down across from myself and joined him for coffee. Story 3. Footsteps in the Laurel Gap. Laurel Gap isn't a road you choose if you've got other options. It's a twisting mountain path, narrow as a thread in places, the kind of road where fog sits low and headlights only make the night feel thicker. I'd been on it too late. After a long day, my eyes raw and heavy, and I figured I'd pull over for a moment before I nodded off behind the wheel. There's a gravel turnout near one of the sharper bends, a patch where hunters sometimes leave their trucks, and that's where I stopped. I killed the engine, left the headlights burning, and sat listening to the tick of the cooling hood and the groan of trees bending in the wind. The silence out there isn't empty. It presses at you, fills the car like water rising. I rubbed my face, telling myself 5 minutes rest was all I needed. When I looked back up, the lights caught movement on the edge of the road. A man was walking along the gravel shoulder, slow and steady. I thought maybe it was just another traveler, someone who'd gotten lost or broken down. But then I noticed the coat, same as mine, dark canvas, worn elbows, same stride, even the same uneven hitch in the step from an old ankle twist I've carried for years. My pulse jumped, but my mind tried to make excuses. Fatigue, tricks of light, imagination. Then he stopped, turned his head toward me, and staring back through the glare were my own tired eyes. I shoved the key forward, the engine coughing alive too loud for the night. Gravel spit under the tires as I pulled out, faster than I meant to. But the road twisted again, and when I rounded the curve, my beams fell on him. Still ahead, still walking, same rhythm. I pressed harder on the gas, but every turn I made, every bend of the road, he was there. Not closer, not farther, just out of reach, like I was chasing myself through the gap. The drive down stretched into something unbearable. I kept glancing in the side mirror, half expecting him to be on my bumper, but it was worse than that. He never had to chase me. He was always waiting, patient, just around the next bend. My knuckles whitened on the wheel, sweat running cold down my spine despite the chill fog sliding through the cracks of the window. At one point, I shouted, just noise, just something human to cut through the suffocating sameness of it. The sound fell flat, swallowed by trees. Finally, the mountain began to break open. Lights of town shimmered faint at the base, and I felt the first shaky relief. My tires hit pavement wider, smoother, and I pushed through until I reached the first stoplight, where brick storefronts and empty sidewalks lined the street. My shoulders sagged. No one was there, no one walking. Just the quiet hum of the engine and the buzz of the light above me. For a moment, I thought I'd left it all behind on the mountain. Then, in the rear view, I saw him, not walking this time, sitting in the back seat plain as day, my coat, my shoulders, my face, smiling faintly, not wide, not cruel, just waiting like he'd always been there, riding along with me. My hands shook so bad I almost killed the engine. I didn't look back again. I drove through every red light that night until I made it home, and even then I couldn't shake the feeling of breath on the back of my neck, patient and steady, matching my own. Story 4. The Cabin Door Visitor. The cabin near Spruce Fork wasn't much, just a squat box of pine boards and tin roofing, leaning a little toward the creek like it had grown tired over the years. I rented it once a year during the second week of November. No phone signal, no road noise, nothing but the sigh of wind through the bare trees and the clatter of branches that hadn't yet fallen. That year, I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not because I was hiding exactly, but because I needed it quiet. Work had twisted me up. Noise had followed me home every night. So I packed light and drove up alone, hoping a few days in that old place would put me right again. The first night passed like they always did. A fire in the stove, beans from a can, a little whiskey to warm the bones. The second night was colder. Wind moved differently, seemed to hesitate before slipping through the cracks in the walls. Around midnight, I killed the lantern and let the dark come in. There's a kind of silence you only get that far out, where the hush settles so deep that even your thoughts feel muffled. I laid in the bunk, listening to the old boards pop and groan under the cold, and let sleep stretch toward me. The knock came just after 2, sharp, not frantic. Just a single rap, like someone too polite to be dangerous. But that's what made my blood run cold, because no one knew I was there. I hadn't passed another car for miles coming in. No tire tracks but mine. I waited, heart drumming in my chest, thinking maybe it was the wind. But then it came again. One knock, measured, expectant. I got up slow, grabbed the lantern and lit it with shaking hands. The shadows it cast felt too thick. I moved to the door without breathing, every board underfoot giving me away. I put my ear to the wood and waited. Silence. Then a breath. Not mine. Close. I opened the door. There I was, same jacket, same face. Drawn from too many bad nights. Same lantern in hand. Only his light flickered opposite mine. When mine swelled, his dimmed. He didn't speak, just stood there, head tilted, like he was studying me from behind glass. I should have asked something, demanded who he was, but the only thing I did was step back and slam the door shut, my back pressed hard against it as if he might lean in and push. I stood there for a long time. The fire had died, and the cold started crawling back in, but I didn't move. I didn't dare. My ears strained for sound, but there was nothing. No footsteps, no knock, just the long ache of the night stretching on. I must have dozed off leaning against that door, because next, I knew, dawn was leaking through the cracks, pale and thin. I opened the door slow, braced for nothing, or for something worse. But the porch was empty. No man, no lantern, just footprints. My own boots, clear as day, leading off the porch and into the woods. Not away from the cabin, but in a circle. They wrapped around the place 3 times, then disappeared down the trail like whoever had worn them decided they were done waiting. I followed them only a few steps before I stopped. The prints weren't fresh. The edges had crusted in the frost. It looked like they'd been made hours ago. Like someone had come early, paced the place while I slept, and only knocked when they decided I wasn't going to come out. I packed that morning. Didn't eat. Didn't bother with the stove. Just threw my gear in the truck and left. The road felt different heading back, like the trees watched instead of waved. When I made it home, I didn't tell anyone what happened. Didn't want to hear myself say it out loud. But every so often when I'm walking past a window at night, I catch my own reflection holding something in his hand, something I know I didn't pick up, a lantern just flickering there, like he's still outside, waiting for me to step out. Story 5. The Trail of Two Shadows I took to the Appalachian Trail in the spring after my brother died. Not for any noble reason, no cleansing pilgrimage, no spiritual healing. I just needed to be gone. The kind of gone that phone calls can't reach, that doesn't check in. I'd been on the southern stretch for weeks, moving steady, setting up late and breaking camp early. Most nights I didn't even light a fire, just the chill, the dark, and my thoughts. That was the point, I guess, to not be seen. But sometime after the Smokies, I realized I wasn't alone. I just didn't know how to explain it. It started with something small, the second shadow. The trail dipped through a notch of rock one afternoon, and as I stepped forward, I saw my shadow stretch out across the flat slab ahead of me. But there was another beside it, same length, same angle, like someone my size and shape was walking in lockstep at my side. I stopped, both shadows halted. I checked the trees, but no branches were moving, no tricks of the light. Just me and two silhouettes where there should have been one. I lifted my arm to drink, and the other shadow drank too. Same rhythm, same arm. Not like a mirror, like a double that already knew what I was going to do. I stood there longer than I should have. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. It's hard to say when the forest goes so quiet it presses in around you. When I finally turned around fast, half hoping to catch someone standing there, all I saw were the trees just swaying a little in the breeze. No one, nothing, and yet when I faced forward again, both shadows were still there, still waiting. That night, I made camp early, tucked off the trail behind a downed oak. I didn't eat, just zipped myself up tight in the bag and listened for footsteps I'd never hear. Still, I swear something shifted outside the tent, soft, like boots brushing pine needles in careful, practiced steps. Over the next few days, I tried not to look at the ground when I hiked. I told myself it had been a trick of the sun, maybe a crease in the rock. I'd been too tired, too inside my own head. But it didn't stop. Every clear stretch of path, every glint of sun between clouds, the second shadow showed up. Sometimes it was a little ahead, sometimes just behind, but always there. It didn't flinch or wobble like mine did. It didn't waver when wind hit, and when I tried to throw it off. Sudden movements, switching hands, skipping steps. It matched me every time. It wasn't just the shadow either, it was the knowing. I'd reach into my pack and feel like I'd already done it. My boots would hit the exact same pattern in the mud each morning, down to the stone scuffs. Once I passed a tree that looked too familiar, like I'd carved it, and when I circled back to check, I found a tiny etching on the bark. My initials, the way I write them, curved just slightly at the bottom of the J. I hadn't done that, not that I remembered, but there it was, waiting like it had been for years. The worst was the shelter. It was tucked in a hollow just off the trail, the kind built decades ago, 3 walls and a roof, open to the wind. It had been empty for years, judging by the rot in the floorboards and the lichen crawling up the posts. I was going to pass it, but rain started spitting down, so I ducked in. The inside smelled of mice and old sweat, the way all those shelters do, but on the back wall, scratched deep into the planks, was my name. Not once, dozens of times. Written in my handwriting, same slope of the E, same narrow A. Over and over again, like someone had been waiting there, carving my name into the wood, practicing it, memorizing it. One stood out. It read, "You stayed here." No punctuation, no flourish, just that. I ran that night. Packed up and kept walking even after dark. Flashlight bouncing wild over the trail. My legs burned and my lungs felt raw, but I didn't stop. Not until dawn cracked grey over the ridge and I found a flat place near a stream. I dropped my pack and collapsed, more from fear than exhaustion. I slept half the day, too deep to dream. When I woke, the stream had swollen with last night's rain and the mud at the edge was soft. Too soft. There were footprints beside mine, not boot tracks. Bare feet, same size, same arch. But they only led in, not out. I haven't hiked since, not even close to those hills, but I've seen the shadow again. On sunny sidewalks, on the whitewashed walls of grocery stores, always beside me, never behind. It drinks when I drink, turns when I turn, and sometimes, when I catch it in the corner of my eye, I get the feeling it's not copying me at all. It's waiting for me to match it. Like I'm the one who came later, like it was always here first. Story 6. The Voice at Cold Spring. I pitched my tent near Cold Spring on a Tuesday in late October, the kind of evening where the sky bruises purple early and the air holds a promise of frost. I'd hiked a long way that day, up from Little Paint Creek, and I remember my legs aching in a clean sort of way, the way they do when you've earned your meal. The spot was flat, tucked between two big poplars with a mossy ridge behind it, and the creek murmuring low at the bottom of the hill. You can't see Cold Spring from the trail anymore, not really. It's just a memory in the trees, a place old maps mention like a whisper. But I'd found it years ago with my uncle, and I knew how to get there even after all this time. It felt safe, or at least, it used to. That night, I cooked slow over a little fire, just beans and jerky, nothing fancy. I remember talking out loud, which I sometimes do when I'm out there alone. Nothing deep, just to keep the silence from closing in too tight. I said things like, "Let's get this lit," or "Don't burn it this time," and I laughed once, soft and tired. The trees seemed to take it all in without judgment, like they'd heard worse. At one point I stood up and looked out into the woods, mostly to test the echo, and called, "Ain't nobody out here but me," in a half-mocking tone. I didn't expect an answer. What I got was silence, full and round and watching. I doused the fire by 9 and climbed into my tent, zipped up, settled down. The night grew cold fast, the way it does when everything's wet. I curled into my bag, tried to sleep. That's when I heard it. It wasn't loud, not at first, just a whisper out in the dark, caught on the breeze like something unfinished. I sat up fast, heart thudding, and held my breath. The voice came again. This time I heard it plain. "Hey," it said, distant and cracked. "Ain't nobody out here but me." My own voice. The same words I'd said earlier, the same cadence, same little tilt on nobody. I froze, blinked, tried to think through it. Could it be an echo, maybe a trick of the canyon? But it had been hours. It wasn't possible. The voice came again. Closer this time. Still mine, but rougher now, like someone playing it through grit. "Don't burn it this time," it said, followed by a short, dry laugh that wasn't quite right. My laugh, but off, thinner. I didn't move, just sat there in the dark, clutching the handle of the knife I always keep near my sleeping bag. The voice kept on. It circled the tent, slow. Like a tired man pacing the edge of a porch. Every few minutes it would speak again, sometimes mumbling, sometimes clear as a bell. But always in my voice. Always something I'd said earlier, though the tone kept shifting, sometimes excited, sometimes mocking. Once, it sounded almost like crying. At one point, it stopped just outside. I could feel it, pressure on the fabric, maybe a palm resting light near my head. Then I heard it whisper, "Let's get this lit," in a voice that cracked halfway through like it had been dragged through dust. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just clamped a hand over my mouth and sat there shivering. I must have passed out from fear, because I woke when the sun cut through the trees. Everything outside looked normal. Nothing broken, no tracks in the frost. But the air felt off, like someone had been breathing too hard in a room with no windows. I packed quick, barely ate, left camp in minutes. As I walked, I started to doubt myself. Maybe I dreamed it. Maybe I'd been talking in my sleep. But halfway down the trail, I found something. A scrap of cloth nailed to a tree. An old bandana, sun-bleached, but on it, written in black ink that had run in the rain, were the words, "Ain't nobody out here but me. I don't carry a pen." I never have on these trips. I didn't stop walking, not that day, not the next. I kept moving till the road came up beneath my boots and I found cars and people and noise. But even now, when the world is loud and bright, I can still hear it sometimes. My own voice, echoing out of the corners of rooms I thought were empty, calling back to me with words I know I've said, but never like that. Like something followed me home. And it's still listening, waiting to repeat something I haven't said yet. Story 7, The Photograph in the Hollow. I'd hiked the ridgeline west of Waynesville plenty of times. Locals don't mark it much. Just one of those half-kept trails the Forest Service gave up on years ago. Good enough for the old deer stands and bad radio signals, too rough for tourists, which is why I liked it. I took the trail when I needed to forget people. That late October day, the air had a strange weight to it, humid under the canopy but sharp in the shade, like the mountain couldn't decide which season to commit to. Leaves had begun to fall, but some clung stubborn to the limbs above, spinning lazy circles when the breeze kicked up. I walked alone, as usual, boots crunching over damp needles, pack light on my back, jacket zipped halfway. The hollow was barely marked, just a narrow dip between two rises, a creek bed dry for the season. I stepped down into it with the intention of taking a short break, sitting for a smoke and maybe a bit of jerky before the long push to the overlook. It was quiet down there, too quiet. No birdsong, no squirrel rustle, just stillness, like the trees were listening or holding their breath. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was the nail. It stuck out of a pine about chest height, rusted flat at the head. Something yellowed fluttered faintly in the breeze, an old Polaroid, weather-cracked and damp around the edges but still sharp in the center. I pulled it loose and stared, more curious than anything else. And what I saw made my chest go tight. It was me, my coat, my day pack, even the tiny fray at the shoulder seam where I'd caught it on barbed wire last spring. I was standing on the very trail I had just come up, framed by the crooked twin birches I'd passed maybe 5 minutes earlier. But in the picture, I was turned slightly to the side, as if I was looking behind me. I had one hand raised like I was shading my eyes, or waving something off. The sky was overcast in the photo, but the sun had been bright all morning. It didn't match. I laughed, not loud, just a breathy kind of disbelief. Some prank, maybe. One of those wilderness art things where strangers leave eerie bits for others to find. Still, it felt personal, intimate. I flipped the photo over, my fingers already starting to tremble before I saw the writing. It was my handwriting, no doubt about it. Same lean on the D, same tight loops in the O, and it said just 3 words, "Don't go back." That's when something cracked inside me. Not panic, not yet. Just unease. Deep and spreading like cold water seeping into boot leather. I turned slowly, expecting someone to be watching, a camera lens peeking from the brush. But the hollow was empty. Still. I stepped out of it faster than I meant to, heart racing in my throat. I kept walking, tried to shake it off. Told myself it was coincidence, even as my boots passed between those same birches from the photo, even as the light dimmed for no reason I could name. My head swam. I checked behind me more than I looked forward, and every time the trail was empty, but too empty, like something had just ducked out of view. I stopped for water and caught myself glancing at the trees like they might speak. By the time I made it to the overlook, I felt wrung out. The view stretched west toward the next ridge, but it didn't bring the calm it used to. I sat down, breathing hard, and pulled the Polaroid from my jacket pocket again. Same photo, same scrawl. I flipped it back and forth a few times, as if some new detail might reveal itself. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before, my face. In the picture, my expression was off. Not scared, not smiling, just tight, like I'd seen something just out of frame and didn't know what to do about it. My eyes weren't looking at the camera, they were looking past it. And now that I stared closer, I realized my raised hand wasn't waving something off. It was pointing. I held the photo up against the landscape, tried to match angles. I turned, lining up the rocks, the tree shapes, the slope of the trail. And then I found the direction my photo self had pointed. Downhill, back the way I'd come. I stayed there too long, long enough for the light to shift cold, the kind of cold that doesn't belong to weather but to memory. And just as I stood to leave, I heard something snap in the woods behind me. Not a squirrel or branch fall kind of snap. A deliberate, heavy-footed kind. I didn't look. I walked, then walked faster. By the time I hit the twin birches again, I was nearly running. The trail had changed, not in shape, but in tone. Shadows leaned wrong. The birds still hadn't returned. And worst of all, the hollow looked different, wider, like the trees had moved farther apart, like they'd opened themselves to make more room. I didn't go back in. When I made it to the trailhead, the lot was empty. My truck stood where I left it, dusted and fine needles. I climbed in, locked the doors without thinking, and sat there for a long time. The Polaroid was still in my hand, damp with sweat. I never told anyone, never posted it online. What would I say? That I found a photo of myself taken by no one, showing something I didn't remember, with a warning in my own hand I don't recall writing. That something in the woods was tracking me not with eyes but with time. I keep the photo in my wallet now, not for proof, not even for memory. More like a talisman, though it doesn't feel protective. More like acknowledgement, like carrying it keeps me honest, or maybe keeps it honest. Because every now and then, especially on hikes, I feel like I've been somewhere before, see a rock or a twist of root that feels wrong in the gut. And when I do, I stop and take out the photo, and if the light hits it right, if I squint hard enough, I swear the image changes, just a little. The trees in the background look older, or younger, or moved, and once, just once, I thought I saw someone else in the picture, off in the edge of the frame, kneeling by the trail, looking up. It wasn't me.